The Lakers are facing their most critical offseason in years, and Rob Pelinka will be in charge. Is he ready to do the job? Is he capable of doing the job? That's next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers first listen to every day, Monday through Friday, sometimes on weekends, even on holidays, and now more than once a day, no matter where you get your podcasts, whether you're an Apple guy, Spotify guy, one of the 37,000 plus subscribers to the Locked On Lakers YouTube channel, you're part of making the Locked On Podcast Network, the number one sports podcast network anywhere you find podcasts. Brian Kamenetsky with Andy Kamenetsky hosting this program. We've covered the Lakers for nearly 20 years with the LA Times and ESPN and The Athletic. And in all that time, Andy, a lot of the same people have wandered in and out of the Lakers orbit, including Lon Rosen, who went from the Lakers to the Dodgers and now is back with the Lakers as president of business operations. I think it's something like that. I'm butchering the right.
Oh, that is the exact title.
It is. Nice. I nailed it. He recently hired to replace
Tim Harris.
Tim Harris, thank you. How soon we forget. Hired to replace Tim Harris, spoke to the media ahead of Tuesday's loss to Orlando. Of course, we covered that in full for the big show on Wednesday. Make sure you check out that episode. But Lon Rosen spoke to the media, and this from Dan Woike of The Athletic. Quoting his tweet, in a conversation with reporters, new Lakers president of business operations Lon Rosen says the plan is for Rob Pelinka, with input from Andrew Friedman and Farhan Zaidi, to continue to handle basketball operations. Pelinka told reporters the plan is to have an expanded front office this summer. So, Andy, this means that the Lakers will be, in fact, trying to build out the front office using that Dodgers model, which is why Andrew Friedman and Farhan Zaidi will be advising, and doing all that infrastructure build out while also navigating arguably the most important offseason they've had in a decade. And Rob Pelinka is going to be at the front of all of it.
It is at least the most important offseason since either they landed LeBron or they landed Anthony Davis in that trade. They're both so connected, you could consider it part of maybe one long offseason and one long process of a build, but it is easily as important as any offseason since then. And as I pointed out before, with Luka Doncic in his prime, and having taken a team to the finals, this is the first time the Lakers have had a superstar that has demonstrated he can take a team to the finals as the number one guy since Kobe in his prime. Yep. And so you're going back, 15, 20 years ago since the Lakers have been in this type of position. It is incredibly important. I know for a lot of Laker fans, the news that they wanted to hear is that Rob Pelinka would not be the person in charge of this moving forward, or that he would be still with the front office, demoted, answering to somebody else. The odds of that happening were always pretty low, if for no other reason than if you were going to do it, frankly, you should have done it by now, because you need to get started on the process of figuring out who you would interview for the job, putting out the feelers, that sort of process. You don't want to be figuring that out, I don't know, maybe a month and a half before the most important offseason in so long.
And this is what they told us they were going to do. Well, more or less.
I don't know if
every signal, at least in my interpretation, every signal that they've put out has been leading to this sort of order of execution in terms of how this was going to be done, where Rob Pelinka and Jeannie Buss would still be in their positions, and with a new mandate and a new directive, and
all I meant was
a lot more money.
All I meant was the difference between signals, which you are correct about, versus reports or formal statements. Tim Harris, when we talked about Tim Harris letting the staff know that this would be his last season, that was 1/4 of Jeannie's inner circle. Right. So with that happening, I could at least understand how some Laker fans, whether reading tea leaves or wish casting, could have thought maybe dramatic changes beyond that were on the horizon, simply because Tim Harris has had a big voice for a long time.
Right.
But if they were going to get rid of Rob Pelinka, it's already overdue. What is most important to me, though, and we'll talk about this, is if Rob was going to stay, and this is something you and I had talked about in the aftermath of Lon Rosen being hired, Tim Harris being on the way out, just the general what comes next with the front office. Neither one of us thought that the odds of Pelinka being replaced were particularly high. But what was really important to me is the front office needs to be buffed out. It needs to be more voices, more experiences, perspectives, particularly, I think is important, ones that were not specifically formed by your time either inside the walls in El Segundo or closely related to things that are Lakers centric. They've needed, frankly, just more manpower. Even if you think Rob Pelinka is the most underappreciated, underrated exec in, forget just the NBA currently, like NBA history, it's too big of a job for a front office that has been as small as, frankly, Rob has wanted it.
Well, that's the part that's interesting about it. And I've seen people talk about it, like skeptical as whether or not Rob will do this, whether they'll do the build out and all these other things. And they're going to. Like there is no,
you don't have a choice.
He doesn't have a choice. And so that part of it is, Pelinka can plausibly say that, part of the reason they haven't had a large basketball operations department is because I wasn't given the flexibility and the money and all these other things to have a large basketball operations department. The fact that that's also was in his best interests and served him best with Jeannie in terms of his own job security and his own power is, I'm sure, just coincidental in that regard. So, he's never been asked to do the thing that he's never really wanted to do. Now he does. Now he has the chance to do it. And so after the break, we'll take a quick break here, but I'll get to a couple things that I think are really challenging, both exciting in any other year, but really challenging and potentially problematic for this one. And we'll get to it next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by FanDuel. If you ever wanted to experience the NBA Finals live and in person, and if you haven't, you should, because it's really, really fun. FanDuel is giving you the chance to turn that dream into reality with their new NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. Use your profit boost on any NBA future, and you'll be automatically entered for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for two. Flights, tickets, the whole nine. And if you are already looking at the board, thinking about which team can make a deep run, this is the perfect time to lock it in. Like, I love futures at this time of year, whether picking a team to win the championship or grab a conference final or grab a conference title. It adds an extra layer of excitement to every game down the stretch. And now, not only can you cash your pick in, that pick could also send you to the finals. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Use your profit boost on an NBA future. Get entered for a chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
Locked on Lakers is also brought to you by Indeed. Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, your inbox overflowing. The one position you have to fill is still sitting open. When the pressure's on, you need the right hire. This is a job for sponsored jobs. Indeed, sponsored jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for. So that may be skills, it's experience, it's location. So you're not just hoping for the right candidate and that they might stumble across your post. You actually make sure that they do. Here's a stat that says it all. In the minute that I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed's sponsored jobs. That's less stress, less time, more results when you need the right person to cut through the chaos. This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs, and listeners of this show will get $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go again to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about it on this podcast, Locked on Lakers. Go to Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire. This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. There are two separate things here, like, that are going on, and they're both equally important, and they're both, Andy, equally important for sort of the long-term health of the team. But one is going to be considerably more noticeable in the short term, and that is, what can you do with this roster in the offseason? We talked at length on Tuesday's big show about Austin Reeves and his future. Like, we're not done talking about that. Like, I got tons of great feedback on that show. I spent a lot of the day kind of thinking about some of the stuff people said to us and we talked about. I kind of have a couple conclusions about that. But, like, that's just one piece that's going on. You got to figure out the LeBron part of it. You got to figure out, okay, how much cap space do we really want to generate, which means potentially which players do we jettison? Then we got to figure out how we're going to fill back in, I think, probably around a Luka and LeBron, presumed Luka and Austin core. But then you got to figure out which players are available to you. Are you going to trade for them? Are you going to try to sign them? Are you going to send out an offer sheet to a Walker Kessler or a Peyton Watson? There's a lot of just personnel stuff that you have to figure out in a weak free agent year with an immense amount of pressure to reshape a roster that at least gets you close to championship contention with something that looks like it should work around Luka Doncic. That is just part one now, Andy, and it is a really big job that a lot of people worry Rob Pelinka is not up for.
Well, I mean, a lot of this is really detail oriented. A lot of this is full top to bottom roster vision. And to be frank, that has not always been Rob Pelinka's strength. I mean, we've seen that Rob often gravitates towards a very specific type of player, a ball handling scorer, very offensively oriented. And, he has, to be fair to Rob, early in his time doing this, put together a roster that won a championship, or at least some of it was constructed in the beginning with Magic in charge, but there were finishing touches Rob put on it. And whether having the foresight to kind of keep Danny Green in your hip pocket, waiting out the Kawhi thing because Danny Green happened to be doing that, rolling the dice correctly on Dwight Howard, even finding a locker room guy that really mattered, like a Jared Dudley. Rob did good work there. I also thought, identifying Avery Bradley, who had been a Rob Pelinka client, these were decisions that worked well. You and I both thought that given the quick turnaround after the bubble to the beginning of the next season, running back the roster as is just was not practical.
Sure.
You needed some fresh legs in there. Dennis Schroeder, Montrezl Harrell, they worked for the regular season. The problems that season were Anthony Davis and LeBron getting hurt. It wasn't roster construction. From there, though,
I still believe if Anthony Davis didn't get hurt, the Lakers go to the Western Conference Finals.
From there, though, Rob's work has been very spotty, very all over the place, and more importantly, and I think what scares a lot of Laker fans, lacking a clarity of vision. If someone asked me, what is Rob Pelinka's vision as an exec for building rosters? I mean, other than identifying stars, wanting stars, and like I said, wanting ball handling scorers, I would say mostly his vision as a basketball exec is, how do I keep my job? Like there has not been a clear vision of what Rob really values from top to bottom, or meshing skill sets, things like that.
Yep.
And this is where, by the way, I think it is so important to be bringing in the outside voices that, assuming this is all being done in good faith, turn into sounding boards for Rob to listen to and hopefully not feel threatened by, but also too, just the legwork and the going through tape and the identification of these players and, going through all the different possibilities. Again, it is too much for Rob Pelinka to be essentially unilaterally in charge of, and it's simply too much on his plate, regardless of whatever disagreements or concerns you have about his vision for building in the first place.
Right. And like you said, I don't think it's not likely, not coincidental. The Lakers have struggled to be creative. They've struggled on the margins. They've made mistakes that don't seem like a big deal, but turn into it. Losing second round picks on things like unloading Marc Gasol or needing to use a second round pick. Granted, got you Luka Doncic, but to facilitate Jalen Hood-Schifino, like just kind of treating little things like that as disposable before you even get into some of the bigger decisions. But like that's one thing. Like this is one huge how you handle this summer. Because again, I think it's going to be really hard to transform the Lakers into a title contender this offseason. But you have to, it's going to be challenging. It's not impossible, challenging. But you have to turn the ship, recalibrate it for Luka Doncic, and make it very clear that, okay, we're a little player here, a rotation piece here, short, or maybe you work on, maybe you trade Austin for depth and you've got everything but that second star, but the rest of the architecture is there and you're one bigger player away from, okay. That's in and of itself a huge job. To do that while you are also bringing in and building out a staff in basketball operations, in scouting, which I have not seen anything that
for what it is worth, really quick, I had Ramona Shelburne on Lakers Talk, my weekly Lakers show for 710 ESPN in Los Angeles. And, Ramona knows the inner workings of the Lakers front office as well as anybody. And Ramona said they actually have, not necessarily specific for scouting, she didn't even say which department, but she said that they have brought in some people. They have not announced anything yet. They haven't felt the need to announce it, but they've already taken steps in terms of filling out some of that infrastructure. And I did not get a sense she meant just Farhan, Zaidi, and Andrew Friedman.
But that gets to actually where I was going, which is what you really want to make sure you're not doing is both of those things at the same time. And so the Lakers have 20 some odd, regular season games left. They've got, hopefully a round or two of the playoffs. And then, the draft follows pretty, closely after the finals. They got a lot of legwork to do there with all the picks they can, so on and so on and so on. They need to be on the basketball ops part of this thing and work this quickly, because you want as close to a working infrastructure as you can get before you stand. You don't have to finish, but you at least want to start. You need to have your scouts. You need, if you're going to try to build and bring in more basketball voices, you want those people in before you're done with, or as quickly as you possibly can once the season is over, because there are certain people you probably have to wait to get before then. This process, and again, this is why I think they're leaning on guys like Andrew Friedman and Farhan Zaidi. Those people are there not to give Pelinka advice on which power forward to go get. They're there to give him advice and how to advise him on process and architecture. They need to get that stuff worked out, and hopefully already have been, because you just don't want to be doing those two things at once. And I agree with you. In a perfect world, you have multiple voices, multiple bits of intelligence, multiple people producing intelligence, providing Rob with everything that he needs to be able to do to be the ultimate, decider in this incredibly critical offseason.
Yeah, the last thing I would say on this is that my hope, the glass half full hope for this new situation moving forward, as somebody like you who has expressed many doubts and reservations about Rob Pelinka in this seat for many, many years. My hope is that this new infrastructure could actually bring out a better version or the best in Rob Pelinka, because if he leans into this new situation as opposed to being territorial, he will hopefully be getting better advice around him, better insight. And Rob Pelinka has been around basketball for a long time. Like, he played at Michigan. Like, it's not that he is ignorant of the game at all, even if what appears to be a lot of his vision or values with the game don't necessarily align with mine or I think yours. He's clearly not without knowledge at all. And if now he's put in a situation where one way or another, trying to consolidate his power or protect his power, protect that space, is likely a waste of time.
Yeah, that's exactly. I'm so glad you put it that way.
It's a waste of time. Maybe this just brings out the best version of Rob, because that energy is just going to be focused on his job.
I'm fascinated by who he's going to bring in. I'm genuinely fascinated by where they go to find talent. Now that they have the checkbook to draw talent from a lot of different places, who do they bring in? Who does Rob hire? Because like you say, I mean, he's going to be undisputedly at the top of the pecking order. That's what they've arranged here. That's how this is going to go. There's not going to hire somebody to put above Rob. I can put Rob in charge of hiring somebody to put above him to, check Rob's work, this offseason. Rob's going to be in charge of it. But like you say, if he does a bad job and gets super territorial about it and whatever, and seems to try to sort of once almost game the system, he's going to lose his job.
Yep.
So you might as well try and get the right people, do a good job, and then you get to keip it.
Yeah,
so we'll see how
absolutely.
It goes. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with over 37,000 subscribers to the channel. Plenty more to talk about with Austin Reeves, with the Lakers, with what's coming up this summer, and what's coming up on Thursday for a huge game against the Suns. Check us out, Cam Brothers on Twitter. We'll see everyone next time.